Vete, vamos a hacer un contrato donde solo figure buen trato. Es puro sentimiento, con todo lo que digo no miento. Te quiero dejar en lo más alto y no me jacto. Baby, te enseño a bailar lento, muy lento, bebé. Toda la noche y de esto no me arrepiento. Si él quiere algo estaré para el intento. Tú eres mía hasta mañana, lo siento. Ven, vamos a acercarnos pa' ver cómo es esto de rozarnos piel con piel. Hoy quiero que te sientas mi mujer una y otra vez. Tu piel es dulce como la miel y sabes que él no la merece. Hoy tengo que hacerte mi mujer y lo sé muy bien. Ven, vamos a acercarnos pa' ver cómo es esto de rozarnos piel con piel. Hoy quiero que te sientas mi mujer una y otra vez. Tu piel es dulce como la miel y sabes que él no la merece. Hoy tengo que hacerte mi mujer y lo sé muy bien.
The views, opinions, and representations expressed on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network and its website are those of the hosts, guests, and participants, and are not necessarily those of or endorsed by the network, its affiliated stations and broadcasts, the management, other hosts, or advertisers of the network. The shows found on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network can, but do not necessarily, promote any particular lifestyle, belief, religion, political affiliation, or other personal practice. These shows are for entertainment purposes only, and are not intended to treat, diagnose, and or claim any cure of disease or condition, or give any medical or legal advice. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, from our compound to you worldwide, with your host, Gary Anderson.
Well, good evening, good morning, depending on your time zone, from the Pacific to Atlantic to worldwide. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark with Gary, and tonight we're going to be talking about UFOs, aliens, and conspiracies with the government containing all those subjects. So you might want to get yourself a nice cup of hot java, maybe some hot cocoa. Find a nice, easy chair to curl up on, maybe next to a fireplace, because we're going to be talking to Steve Erdmann right after this.
you can advertise your business on Night Dreams Talk Radio, and you will be heard worldwide. Why not contact us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com.
Well, hi, Steve. How you doing tonight, my friend?
Yeah, Gary, thanks for having me on.
Well, I'm more than happy to have you on. You want to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, or they can, know who you are?
I'm a I guess you call it a freelance journalist, and I've written on many topics, running the gamut, I guess, from conspiracy to government corruption to UFOs. They all interconnect somewhere along the line. When you start investigating one, you see the connection with the other. I'm 74, and I go back quite a ways, and I've got quite a life history to talk about. And unfortunately, it's led to my it's led to my cynicism about our society and our culture and our government and the way people operate and the way they treat each other. Back in, I guess I had my, concerning UFOs, and I guess I had my first major UFO sighting when I was about 16. I think, I'm not doing arithmetic real quick in my head, but I think in 1959, 1960. And it happened in my own backyard. And of course it was enough to convince me there's something going on. And then right after that, I started subscribing to different UFO publications and writing with friends and acquaintances in the field, and just took off from there.
Well, how old were you when you had your first experience with that UFO?
I think it was 1960, the summer of 1960. And you had to do the arithmetic. We had gone down to the Fox Theater, next door neighbor and two of his buddies, to see the Steve Reeves movie, Hercules Unchained.
Oh, yeah.
It either was that movie, because 1 year later they came out with another Steve Reeves movie. I think the 1 year it was Steve Reeves, or was Hercules, and then the next year was Hercules Unchained. And we went down to the Fox, and youngsters, they do crazy things, so we were waiting for the bus to go back to South City. That was in uptown St. Louis, the Fox. And buses came and went, and we just let them go on by, and we're talking and walking and talking and walking. And eventually we just forgot about the buses, and we walked all the way to South St. Louis. It took about an hour or so.
That's quite a nice walk, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And the two friends trailed off to their place where they lived, and then my next door neighbor and I were talking, and he went in his front door, and we're living in a Siamese duplex where the two not apartment complexes, but it was two houses were kind of joined together there, and we had a gangway, and it must have been well after midnight. And I decided I was going in through the back door, and had a gate down the gangway, and then a small oak tree on the other side. And not thinking too clearly, there was this bright light shining through the trees. I said, "Oh, the moon, man, it's bright." And latched the gate and start walking towards the porch and say, "Well, I want to look at the moon and see what it's going," And it wasn't the moon. It wasn't the moon at all. In fact, if I'd been thinking right, at that time of the night, the moon would have been fairly overhead, and not at that level, And I, not thinking, it struck me as a huge dove, snow white dove. I don't know why. Like I told you earlier, most of these things are archetypes, symbolic. And then my mind registered a little more clear, and this object shimmered and shaked and started revolving, and it just went up over the yard until it was up beyond the line of vision and disappeared.
Well, how big was it, Steve? Do you remember?
It's hard to tell because it was in a clear sky on the other side of the tree, and I'm just guessing. I mean, I can take a guess, but it was close. and I would say maybe 100 feet. But when you see these things, the question is, how are you seeing them? You know, are you seeing them as solid objects there? Are you seeing them in some other way? But it was enough to convince me these things exist, whatever they are. And of course, then I got into a lot. Eventually, I think about 1967, a few friends and I had got together and just met in my upstairs apartment that I was living at the time. And there were some engineers and some scientists and some hobbyists. And we decided to form the UFO Study Group of Greater St. Louis. And the president was John Schuessler. You may be familiar with him. He's a MUFON investigator now. Yeah, he was a president. And, well, he's investigated some pretty major UFO incidents. The Betty Cash incident, the Landrum, he investigated that on the spot. But that was years later. But there were about 7 of us, and we formed a study group. And then later on, we went on different UFO cases. And I started an animal mutilation subcommittee for the group and started looking into the rash of cattle and animal mutilations going on.
And still going on, Steve. You know Timothy Cullen. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was like a number 13 implant removal from Dr. Roger Lear. And after he had his implant, he really got into, UFOs and abductions because, hey, if you've been implanted and all this stuff, I guess it would make you more aware of what's going on. He started going out and investigating, cattle mutilations. And, when he was on my show talking about it, it was eerie. How he would find these, expensive bowls, with their sex glands removed, their tongue removed, their heart removed, with laser precision, cuts, and no blood. In one of the cases, it was snow there. It snowed, and, no signs of anything, grabbing it. But it was interesting. He said that there was a gopher hole, and somehow that cow, when it was whatever it was done, dropped. His head was stuck in the gopher hole.
I don't know. There's surely, who's ever behind that, or it's almost like it's a metaphysical aspect because they have magical qualities that they can do certain things that normal human beings can't. And there's some strange cases as far as the cattle mutilation. Of course, the official position, the debunkers always try to put a very lame, discordant explanation. They were predators. Predators can do this, and they'll go the extra mile. What was it?
Or the military.
Or the military. There are a lot of it could be explained by military because some of them are a little more mundane than others. I know there's been one case where a cow's head was cut off and they found a scalpel nearby. So I don't know exactly where the one begins and the other ends, but there certainly seems to be something magical quality about not just the mutilation, but UFOs in general.
It is. I had a guest on, maybe going on a year now. He was a long-haul trucker, and he was going into a desert. I can't remember. Yeah, going into the desert in somewhere in Texas. And he said all of a sudden he saw bright lights out of his, driver's side cab window. And he slowed down. He's looking at it, and he said he swears up and down, and I had a long talk with him before he went on the air. He saw this cow, no ropes, no nothing, going up in the air. In this light beam.
Yeah, it sounds like a typical UFO explanation. Maybe, I don't know. I guess some of the mutilation reports connected with UFO are about as diverse as UFO reports in general. None of them one seems to match the other, except maybe